As far as things like that go, my philosophy is, man, I don't care how you do your horn drop, right? As long as it's awesome, right? As long as it's excellent. So like trying to keep that in mind. If there's excellence taking place, does it really matter like how? As long as the kids are being taken care of and the instruction is being done in an efficient and high quality way, things don't have to be the Joe Santanello way, especially right away, right? If things are excellent, that's great. If there's things happening that aren't excellent, then ask questions. Hey, tell me about this. So why do we do this way? Or like, would you consider doing this? Those kinds of things.
Welcome to Director's Circle, a podcast featuring insight from music educators and school leaders discussing their philosophies on the administrative leadership of a comprehensive music program. I'm Doug Conrad, and I'm coming to you live from my one-bedroom apartment in Western Maryland. Let's begin. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Director's Circle. I'm Doug Conrad. First, I'd like to take a moment and thank you for tuning into this episode and all of your continued support in supporting our podcast. As we've just started just a few mere months ago, it doesn't feel like it, but anyway, just with all the support of all you listeners, whether it be tuning into an episode, sharing word of an episode or the show with a friend, we've been really taking off, getting lots of great feedback and picking up new listeners month by month, and it's just been growing, and I want to thank you for that. And if you had a moment, even right now, if you're on a cell phone, you can do this in under 30 seconds. Ways that you can continue to support the show are a few simple ways. By one, going to Facebook, looking up our show page under Director Circle and giving it a like, and that way you'll stay updated on all future events, whether it's an episode or something else we'll share. Another way you can stay updated on all future episodes is going over to iTunes or Google Play Music and subscribing, so that way when a new episode pops up, it's automatically downloaded to your device. And if you are on either of those services, please make sure to give us a 5-star rating to help our show reach new listeners under searches for educational or music podcast. Now, like most of you, I'm sure the school year has wrapped up. For summer, it's just beginning for some. Some are still going on. I know myself, we just ended school last week, and for some of the brave souls out there, from what some people have told me in messages to the show page, that they have school all the way until June 24th or 5th. Whew. But anyway, if you're still going, keep up the good fight, keep pushing till the end, and we'll see you on the other side. Sometimes people will ask me as a teacher, how do you know when summer really begins? Some might say it's when the community pool opens, when we first start firing up the grill or whatnot, or when the flowers start blooming in the garden. Really, my first realization for summer happened this morning when I woke up and I really had to check my phone just to double check what day of the week it was. And I must tell you that it was marvelous just to have that feeling. So as summer is now underway, I have lots of great things in my own professional development plan book to go through, lots of books to read, lots of people to talk to, and many more episodes are coming up in the next few weeks. So speaking of today's episode, along with that topic of this time of the year, it's a year when a lot of people are moving on to new opportunities professionally, or you may just have graduated college and are looking to enter your first full-time gig. The person that we are speaking to today is a well-respected master teacher in Pennsylvania, Mr. Joe Santanello, and he's going to talk about leaving a powerhouse middle school band program and entering a well-storied, traditioned powerhouse high school program in Pennsylvania, and just kind of what it's like leaving one master program and entering another and going through all those phases. So now, to tell you a little bit more about Mr. Santanello, for the past 10 years, Joe Santanello has served as the director of bands at Strayer Middle School in Quakertown, Pennsylvania. In addition to teaching at Strayer, he has been the co-director of the Quakertown Community High School Panther Marching Band and also directs one of the high school's 2 jazz bands. He maintains a regular performing schedule as the principal horn of the Pennsylvania Symphonic Winds and also plays with the Berks Opera Company and the Liberty Wind Symphony. Mr. Santanello is also the music director and principal conductor of the Quakertown Community Band, one of America's oldest community bands. Beginning in 2019, Mr. Santanello will take on the role as the high school director of bands at North Penn High School in Lansdale, Pennsylvania. Hello, Joe. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Doug. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you here. So now, as we're going to go ahead and start off some things, why don't you tell us about yourself and your background, kind of what you're doing now, and what you'll be doing in the next few months professionally.
All right. Joe Santanello, band director. For the last 10 years, I've been working in the Quakertown Community School District in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. I've been the Strayer Middle School band director as my main job, directing the 3 concert bands at the school, jazz band. I've also been lucky enough to be the co-director of the Quakertown High School Panther Marching Band for 10 years, directed one of the 2 high school jazz bands for the past 8 years. I am the director of the Quakertown Community Band, which is one of the nation's oldest community organizations, making music continuously since 1877. I'm a Westchester University graduate. I got my undergrad there in 2009, and I got my master's in conducting from the American Band College in 2014. I'm just about to finish up my 10th year in Quakertown, and starting next year I'll be the band director at North Penn High School, and that's in Lansdale.
Great. So while you're wrapping up your career at Strayer, over that time you really saw a lot of growth and significance in the program, both in numbers and in quality. I know there's lots of accomplishments you guys have had with programs, playing at different conferences and whatnot. So can you talk about, just for some of our listeners who might not be familiar with the program, what are some of the major accomplishments of the Strayer program in the past 10 years?
I think the biggest accomplishment that we've had is the number of students we've been able to reach and the quality of experience we've been able to give them. When I took over the program in 2009, we had 3 grades, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and only about 120 students in the program, so about 40 students per grade. Over the course of the next 10 years, we were able to more than double the size of the band program, had it up to about 250 students 2 years ago, and then we kind of restructured our district a little bit. I don't no longer teach 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I just teach 7th and 8th. But we're still huge in number compared to where we started. I've tried to make the concert program a big emphasis. There's always been a great jazz program in Quakertown, but concert band and the concert band experience has always been secondary there, especially at the middle level. And so it's been a big focus of mine to make that an exceptional experience on par with the jazz program. So we were able to play at the PMEA conference in Erie in 2017 with the Wind Symphony. The year before, we played at the PMEA conference in Hershey with the jazz band. So that's been a big focus, is getting the concert program to be a big deal. I feel like with the concert program, you have an opportunity to reach so many more children. Jazz band, of course, is limited to your big band instrumentation, and now we're able to offer all kids, regardless of instrument, a truly outstanding experience. So, those 2 PMEA experiences were really important and big signs of growth for the program. So yeah.
Cool. And that's really cool how you mentioned about really trying to put that focus on the concert band program, because sometimes when I've had previous guests on, or even in conversation with other directors, we'll talk about growth in the program, numbers, and a lot of people think that'll be in components of, hey, make the marching band bigger, as that's the largest visual component of a band program in a district, as we all know. But at the middle school level, really especially trying to sell that concert band philosophy, really kind of getting kids to latch on to that art form. What approaches did you take to really trying to get kids to really buy into that philosophy of the program that you were going, and really getting to love the experience of concert band in that medium versus playing in jazz band or something else?
Sure. I mean, it's a challenge. And, one of the things I did was really try to talk with kids and sit down and say, hey, things are going great with our jazz band. It's exciting. We travel, we go to competitions, we do all this stuff. But our Wind Symphony program is not the same, right? We're not attracting enough kids. We're not, there's not as much excitement about concert band, wind symphony as there is with jazz. And so talking with the students, I think, is an important thing. Over the course of these last 10 years, I've done a lot of surveying my kids, talking to them, trying to get their input into like why is wind symphony not as cool as jazz band, and so hearing their input was really important. I think in general, I've been trying to make sure that students know at the middle level that they can be excellent. I think one thing that kind of bugs me about the band directing community is that middle school is looked at as kind of a secondary place to be, right? There's no like there's very few people that are out there that are like, yeah, I want to have a killer middle school program, right? Everybody wants to be the high school band director and work with a high school band. And I think one thing I've tried to get across to my students is that like middle school band can be awesome, right? Middle school band can be excellent. There can be a huge high level of musicianship happening at the middle level. There's great literature being written for the middle level now, which maybe wasn't happening 20 or 30 years ago. So letting kids know that concert band is a place where they can experience excellence, I think has been pretty important.
Neat. So, yeah, and speaking of student excellence, one big thing, any of your groups I've ever heard, whether it be at the PME conference where we had met up, or even sometimes for anyone who follows you on social media, you'll sometimes have like little snapshots of what your kids are doing in jazz band or concert band. And it's really intriguing just to hear the sounds that are coming out of people at that age level. So could you talk a little bit about what specific ways you might go about in developing your program to where at the 7th and 8th grade level, your students are not only performing at an excellent level as far as technical ability, but also just with their ability to play expressively and with a high level of maturity?
I'm going to take you back to like how I got into this career. When I was in school, I was probably like right at the beginning of the whole AP wave, right? Where they're trying to push kids into taking AP classes and stuff. Like I was definitely one of those kids that was pushed that way academically. And, for a while I was like, well, I'm taking all these AP classes and I guess I should do something like be a doctor or a lawyer. And I got to thinking like, if I need to do something every single day for the rest of my life, it's got to be something I really love doing. And the only thing I really truly enjoyed doing was making music. And that's how I ended up being a band director. And fast forward to, my first year as a middle school band director, and hearing some of the sounds that were coming out of my kids and going, whoa, what have I got myself into? I kind of asked myself that same question. If I have to listen to this band in front of me every day for the next 30 years, like what do I want the band to sound like? So it started with that question. What do I want this group to sound like? And the answer was I want it to be phenomenal, right? I want it to be great. I want to hear blend and balance and intonation. I want to hear musicality and expressiveness. And so once I committed to like, this is what I want to hear, this is what I want my kids to sound like, I became very committed to that idea. And it took kids a while to buy into that. But kids at the middle level, they're still people pleasers. They want their teachers to be happy, right? They want to hear that they did a good job. And I think you just have to be really persistent, and you have to say, it comes down to playing that first concert F at the beginning of rehearsal, right? If you don't like the sound of what you're hearing, like let the kids know. No, guys, that's not how it is, right? We need to listen down to tubas. We need to be blending with the members of our section. We have to be using good embouchure and good airflow so we're in tune. And if it's not what you want it to be, like don't move on. And the kids will respect that. Another thing I try to make sure my kids understand is that I'm always going to be really honest with them. And I tell them I'm not going to say that you sound good if you don't sound good. And then they know when they get that compliment, when they get that praise, like they know it's for real. So kind of having those two things as the basis, one being you have to know what you want your group to sound like. And two, being fully committed to honest feedback for the kids. Going from there on, that's a good way. So that's been one thing. Secondly, I think that you have to have high expectations for your group, and you have to communicate that to the kids. I tell my kids all the time, we want to break the stigma of middle school band, right? Like nobody out there at home wants to go see a middle school band, right? When they hear like, oh, you want to come and see my cousin's middle school band concert, like nobody's like, oh yeah, that's how I want to spend my Friday night. But I tell them, like I said, once they get in the door and hear you play, you're going to change their mind, and that's something kids can buy into a little bit. We say we want to make people not be able to believe they're hearing a middle school group. So if you get that buy-in from the kids, they're capable of a lot. They really are. So, getting that message across that, hey, just because this is a middle school band, it doesn't have to sound what most people think of a middle school band as. You just have to be persistent. You can't give up on the kids. You can't tell them they sound good if they don't sound good. Like, they deserve your honesty. They deserve to have high expectations set for them. So, a lot of it is that kind of philosophy that's driving what we're doing.
Okay, yeah, and I remember at the conference in Erie, and what was that, 2017?
Yeah.
Or 17, that's right, yeah. And I just remember walking into the room with that performance and really just hearing some of the sounds that the kids were playing, though. It really struck me, like, as you said, kind of breaking that barrier almost, or the perception of what is a middle school band and what are they capable of. Really just hearing those kids, if I had to close my eyes, I would be thinking I would be listening to maybe a more advanced high school wind ensemble. Just with the level of maturity, we wouldn't even say with technical playing or tone color or anything like that, but just in the expressive qualities that they were really performing in their music. That's what really I took away from that performance, and what really kind of changed my mind as to what, hey, this is what a middle school band could sound like someday for me, even in my own program. Yeah. So just developing that level of maturity into your students, into their playing, because that is something, especially for their age level, socially, they might not even reach that social maturity yet. So to have that level of maturity and that expressive element in their playing, how do you guys go about developing that in the Quakertown program?
Well, one thing is that I've been lucky enough to go out and listen to a lot of groups. Like, I go to Midwest every year. And the first time you go to Midwest and you're hearing middle school bands there, you're like, okay, I feel terrible about myself now.
Yeah.
Right. And in my first couple years out there, I was like, all right, this is what a middle school band should sound like. Great. And I took that sound home, and I just kind of relentlessly pursued that with my kids. A lot of it has got to be not giving in to thinking what the kids want, right? I feel like there's a lot of middle school directors out there, and I probably was like this too at the beginning of my career, that are like, oh, I got to keep them interested. We got to play like, 75% pop tunes and whatever. And it's like, no, you can have kids come in. If you have a 50-minute rehearsal, you can spend 25 of those 50 minutes on long tones and breathing and phrasing exercises, and you can talk about blend and balance for half of your rehearsal every day, if you frame it the right way, if you help the kids understand why we're doing it. And that's been it. It's been a really big commitment to long tones and listening and breathing, and trying to let the kids know, like, this is the way we're going to sound great. And being really committed to that. I know there's a lot of pressure on all of us as band directors to provide entertainment to the community, right? And it's like, I got to have 7 songs at the concert. Well, like, do you? Like, what if you did 3 songs, but the blend and balance was like outstanding, right? And the kids really understood what they were listening to. Someone told me once, like, no one's ever gone to a concert and been like, I wish it was a little longer, right? Do 3 pieces, but spend half your rehearsal time on blend and balance and intonation. And then those 3 pieces are going to come together. They're going to come together, and the product is going to be much higher. We're all pressed for time. And I think if we could all take a step back and say, all right, rather than pump out, 40 minutes of music in a concert, I'm gonna scale it down to 15 to 20 minutes with my middle school level, right? But we're all gonna be really, really sure about how we want to sound as a group, and we're gonna take the rehearsal time to do it. So yeah, I wish there was like a really cool secret I could tell you, but it's like it's the same way you develop tone on your instrument, right? And our bands are our instrument,
Yeah,
right?
it's just about
My
rolling up
wind
the
symphony
sleeves.
is my instrument. Yeah, so it's like dig in, get passionate about it, and if you don't like what you're hearing, let them know, let the kids know. Nah, this isn't the sound, right? Here's how we get the sound. Clarinets play softer, trumpets play softer, low brass play out. Another big thing, Doug, has been instrumentation and balance. I get my crew of 6th graders every year, and Quakertown's just like every other place. You're getting 25 trumpets and 17 flutes. You have like 2 trombones and 1 baritone and no tubas, and 18 alto saxes. And you take a couple weeks to evaluate the kids, and then you start moving them around. And it's like, all right, 4 of you trumpets are now French horns, and we need 3 tubas. Somebody volunteer. And that's been really important. Is I know in Quakertown we try to make sure that every individual grade is a fully balanced ensemble, right? So like 6th grade has 2 tubas, and 7th grade has 2 tubas, and 8th grade has 2 tubas. We have a bari sax and multiple bass clarinets in every band. We're really trying to make sure that every grade is a balanced instrumentation, and there has to be a kind of a program-wide plan for instrumentation. Otherwise, you're gonna get to high school band, and you're still gonna have your 25 trumpets and your 17 flutes, and no tubas, and whatever. So, because we know if we're gonna talk about blend, balance, and intonation and things, if you don't have that full instrumentation, it's going to be really hard to do.
Yeah, so some really cool perspectives there. So now to elaborate a little bit on about with your other work at Quakertown too, a big partner in crime with yours has been Frank Parker, the high school director. And for anyone who doesn't know Frank, one of the best in the business as far as being a band director, high school band director is concerned in Pennsylvania. Really great accomplishments across all boards with his program, and especially as you said, working too with the high school group. So a lot of your kids are going on to Frank's program once they go on from 8th grade. So being a person that is kind of a feeder program for the high school level, what kind of things do you envision for having your students being able to do before they enter the high school level?
Well, yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned my work with Frank, because we do have a really great relationship professionally and personally. He's a pretty cool guy. But professionally, like, we take the time to sit down and talk about the program. If you're a middle school band director, or if you're a high school band director and you're not talking to your counterpart all the time about what you want the program to look like and sound like that's the place to start. We've been on the same page for all 10 years in terms of, this is what we want the end result to be, right? Keeping that end goal in mind. Instrumentation is a big part of the conversation, right? So that every year he's getting a 9th grade group that has all the pieces, and he doesn't have to scramble. Like, that's where we do the work, is down at the middle level. Having a curriculum that's aligned from 4th grade to 12th grade. And that's something we've done as a department all the time. Here's what kids should sound like at the end of 4th grade. Here's what a kid should sound like at the end of 8th grade. And here's what we want them to be doing as a 12th grader. And kind of that vertical alignment has been really important. But yeah, working together and talking about it, right? And it's not just happening on like professional development days. We are going and hanging out on each other's patios 3 times a week, or going out after marching band practice, and talking about how to make this program great. It's kind of obsessive, I guess you could say. We've put a lot of time and thought into it. And I think I'm lucky in that way. I have a guy that I can work with really well. But building a relationship with your feeder, if you're a high school person, or with the school that you're sending your kids off to, is really, really important for the health of the program.
Yeah, definitely. And especially just being able to work with someone like Frank, I'm sure has been an incredible learning experience too. Just I remember even in conversations with him, like say at Midwest or at the PMEA clinic once in a while, just even having a off the bar, not even if you're talking shop, it's just being able to collaborate and work with somebody like that is a tremendous experience. So I know even just in my interactions with them, in the few minutes that they've been from time to time too is amazing. I can only imagine what those conversations are like 3 nights a week out of the marching band season. So
well, you can ask my wife. She usually has to sit through those conversations. They may not be as interesting as you think, but
yeah.
we're definitely talking about band all the time. Like what we want the program to be. It's relentless. But I think the results have been good as a result. But yeah, and you know what? I've learned a lot from him, certainly. And I think everybody has to be willing to learn, no matter like what your age or your experience level. I mean, I'm still learning stuff every day from people like Frank and some of my mentors and older directors. So, that amount of being humble, understanding you don't know everything, which old Joe Santanello from 15 years ago probably didn't think about too much, but I know now, like, yeah, I don't know everything, and there's a lot to be learned from our mentors.
Yeah, definitely. Now, so now to move on a little bit about kind of where you've been within the past few months and where you're going to be looking at within the next upcoming months of your career. So, at some point this year, when you definitely had confirmation and had confirmed to go on and be the next upcoming high school band director at North Penn, what ways did you start preparing that news for your students, kind of how to break that? Because I'm especially sure, having worked there about 10 years in Quakertown, and with seeing a program overall, because like a lot of kids, and especially in the high school, I'm sure have a very close relationship with you. What ways did you go about breaking that news once you knew that you were going to be moving on to another location? Just how do you share that information with others, or what did you want them to know, or what kind of ways did you have those conversations?
That's a great question. It was the hardest part about accepting a new position and moving on, was that dread of having to break it to my kids and my families. And yeah, I've been in Quakertown for 10 years. I live in Quakertown, so I'm not just seeing the kids at school all the time. I'm seeing them at the supermarket. I'm fully immersed in the community, and I love that about my current position. And as you mentioned, I am really close with a lot of the high school kids. Being the high school marching band director with Frank, doing one of the high school jazz bands, I've had the opportunity to work with these kids as they become older. I've worked with the juniors for 6 years. I've worked with the seniors for 7 years. And we've been able to, foster an incredible relationship over that time. So it was like majorly daunting and sad to have to tell everybody that I was moving on. The first thing I did was meet with my marching band leadership team, my drum majors and section leaders. I pulled them in for a little meeting. They were like, "Oh, are we in trouble?" And I was like, "No. This was in April, about a day or two after I accepted the position at North Penn, and it was about to go out for a vote with the school board. So I pulled them in, and after they found out they weren't in trouble, they were like, "Oh, is this good news?" They're like, "Are you having a baby?" And I was like, "No." I was like, "Sorry guys, it's not good news." And everybody got real quiet. And I explained to them that I was going to be moving on, and I accepted a position at North Penn. And then we all cried a lot. I know I cried. I did a little blubbering, and the kids cried. And we just kind of sat for about 15 minutes, and they asked some questions and everything, and it was tough. It was really tough. Now that was about 2 days before we were going to Disney World on a trip. So the Disney trip kind of took that part off everybody's mind a little bit, and made things a little better. So after I told the marching band kids, I was on a Thursday night or something. The next morning, I had my students at my middle school, and then I told them to. I told the marching band leaders to keep it quiet for about 12 hours so I could tell the middle school kids myself, so they weren't finding out from somebody else. And then so that day I met with each of my 3 concert bands for their regular class and kind of had to break the news to them. And I cried 3 more times. Every time I had to break the news to another group of kids, there were tears. And it was rough. It was really rough. But I think kids understand. They understood, my reasons for wanting to move on. They kind of saw it as a great opportunity, which it is for me. An opportunity to work at the high school level full time, which is something I was interested in. They understand and respect the quality of North Penn too. Who I think Quakertown and North Penn are 2 of the best band programs on this side of the state. And it was tough for all of us, really. The nice thing is that North Penn did things really well by posting the job early. Right? I mean, they posted it in January, and I applied, and I was interviewing throughout March, and we were able to make a decision and announce by April. And so, first of all, if there's anybody out there that's gonna have a band director position open, like, see if you can work with your administration and get it done that time of year.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, well, that can be especially rough because I know in my first gig, it's not my current one, but in my first gig, I had actually gotten my job and acceptance at the board meeting. Like, I knew I was the guy literally 1 week before band camp. And sometimes when you go down to that wire, man, of like late August, it can just be a little more trickier than others, especially for a first time with anybody.
It's tough. It's tough, and it's traumatic for kids. It's traumatic for the community. I mean, a band director is a huge part of a school. It's a huge part of a community. The fact, I mean, it was hard, right? It was tough. And like I said, there was a lot of tears. But that was 2 months ago, right? I was able to go through my last 2 months with the kids and really kind of treasure what we had and enjoy each other's company and go through all the stages of grief, right? And, we're now in that acceptance phase where, I'm proud of the kids. I'm excited about the future for them. They're happy for me. They're wishing me well. And so, like, the traumatic part of it is over. And at the same token, like, the North Penn kids have the same experience. They have had a couple months to soak it in. Their band director's retiring, and with retirements like that, I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty. And North Penn kids, I'm sure, were concerned. What's the new band director going to be like? Is he going to change everything? Is this going to be, are we still going to be able to be great? And so I've had the opportunity to go over there several times, meet with the kids, meet with the parents. Introduce myself, explain my philosophy, answer really tough questions.
Oh, geez, so what are some of those questions like?
So I got to meet with the whole marching band staff over there. So I met with their coordinators and caption heads. Met with the full marching band staff. Did a lot of conversations with staff members. Met with the principal. Finally, I got to do a meeting with their parent organization, and they have a fantastic parent organization in North Penn, which I'm used to because Quakertown has one of the best too. So it was a big parent meeting, probably about 30 people there. And, the questions started off easy. Tell us about your background and, your education, like things like that. And I mean, it got down to like really, really specific questions. What do you think about participating in different circuits, right? We mostly do U.S. bands, but in the past, North Penn has also done some BOA regionals and things like that. So questions about circuits, questions about drill design. Like, where do you fall on the spectrum of really hard, cutting-edge drill design versus, less intense drill that's easier to perfect and things like that? And like, on one hand, I was like, great, this is awesome. Like, these parents really care about this band program. On the other hand, I was like, wow, this is intense.
It's almost like a job interview, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Even after you have the job, yeah.
I had the job, but like not in their minds. Like I needed to pass a few tests first. So
yeah.
But it's enabled us all in both districts to be able to be okay with some big changes. Mm-hmm. As traumatic as it was for the kids and the parents in Quakertown to learn that I was moving on, we've all had time to kind of accept it and soak it up and and be ready to move on. And over there in North Penn, they've been able to get rid of all the fear and the unknown, right? And now they know who I am, and they know my outlook, and they know my plans for the year, and like we're ready to hit the ground running.
Excellent.
So both districts were able to handle that pretty well, and Quakertown has already hired my replacement, which is great.
Excellent. So speaking of your replacement now, because you guys actually are the interesting situation you are in right now. You're starting up and preparing the program, as you said with North Penn, but also with Quakertown. Are you guys still in school right now?
Yeah, both schools have another week. So
okay, yeah, and for anyone listening, today's date is actually June 9th. So, but yeah, because that's the weird thing in Pennsylvania. My school district, we are in South Central Pennsylvania in Adams County, and I think we just ended up last week. Some I know even go till the 20th up north where I used to be in a previous job, and it's just crazy. But it's nice that you still have a couple days left to prepare the band room, prepare your inventory, your files and stuff. Yeah. So let's say if I'm your successor now, how are you kind of walking them into filling your position? Is it something you've been doing gradually, maybe meeting up for coffee with them, or do you plan on just kind of giving them one big packet of files and maybe meeting for an afternoon and saying, hey, here you go, have fun? It's like, what's that process looking like?
Well, having been in Quakertown for 10 years and really caring about the future of the program, I want to do everything that I can to make sure that my successor is successful. So we've been in constant communication over the past few weeks about everything, every aspect of the program. So there's been a lot of like emails back and forth with questions. There's been a lot of she came over recently and I just kind of gave her a tour of the band room and the stage and the music library and the practice rooms and kind of just give her the whole layout. It's interesting because you want people to be able to feel like they can walk in and, start to make their mark on the program, but you also don't want them to have to start from scratch, so I'm providing all my resources and saying, hey, look, here's the technique pack we've used for the last 10 years. You're welcome to use it. I like it. I'm proud of it. It's all yours if you want it. Here's what we do for warm-ups every day. And, this is how I've gotten them to sound the way that they sound. And like, you're welcome to use it. You're welcome to adapt it, whatever. But I want the person to be able to step in and have a ton of resources, to not have as much confusion and uncertainty as when I stepped into the position. But you also don't want to feel like you're telling somebody like, all right, it's your band now, but you still have to do everything the way I did it.
Yeah.
You want to make sure they know they have room to start making their own mark on the program.
Yeah, and that can be sometimes like it's a two-sided sword, like preparing a new person to come in, but especially then with you said in the ideal scenarios where you do have some time for the kids, the community, parents, and all involved to just let it sink in, that change is coming. So how are you preparing your kids to understand, hey, there's going to be new leadership next year. Things might be similar. Some things might be different. But how are you kind of preparing them just for those little subtle differences?
Well, I think one of the things is you want to make sure that the kids have the opportunity to meet the new person. So I was able to bring her in a week ago and introduce her to all the kids. She was able to give her background and talk to them about things, let them answer questions or ask questions. She's a graduate of Quakertown, which is great. And I was able to, tell the kids like, hey, this person was just like you 15 years ago, sitting in this band. She understands what it means to be part of the Quakertown band program. She understands the high level of excellence. She understands all the expectations, and she's going to be committed to keeping it that way, and helping you guys to become even better. So that was cool. And it's middle school, and, the kids have things that they're worried about that maybe as an adult, a band director, you're not thinking about. But it was nice. I had kids come up to me afterwards and say, oh, she's really nice. I'm like, yeah, she's nicer than me. You guys are going to be fine. So that's been nice. And I've been able to do the same thing at North Penn. Not only have I been into the high school to meet all the kids, starting with the marching band section leaders first, and then the kind of the whole general population of the band, but I've been able to go to each one of the middle schools and talk to the kids and say like, hey guys, I'm going to be your band director in a couple years. You know, think about being in marching band and email me questions, whatever. Like I'm here for you, and kind of get everybody to know who I am and what I think about band.
Yeah, that's a really cool point, especially I really liked how you said going into the middle school. So it's not just like you're embracing and just trying to build that rapport with the high school kids you're doing work with on day one, but just embracing, if not the program, but almost that community as a whole. It really seems like you're trying to tackle all those pins at once, which really seems neat. So is that something you've kind of spearheaded, or is that something that you've worked under advisement or coordination with people from North Penn, or how's that going?
Well, for me at Quakertown, it was kind of something that Frank and I really wanted to make sure we did as soon as we could, as soon as there was a hire. And we really pushed the admin to post the position, to start the interview process, to get things going so that we were able to hire somebody before school let out for this very reason, so that everybody would get a chance to meet her or him and make sure that there was a lot of that uncertainty and that fear could be resolved before school let out. And at North Penn, it was really driven by the department head, who's just a great guy and has an outstanding philosophy on the music department. And he was like, man, we got to get you over here and you got to talk to kids and meet kids and get everybody feeling comfortable. So it's really just been handled like extremely well. You know, like band directing is a people activity, right? Like this is a people profession. I think the most important thing about being a band director is building relationships with people, building relationships with students, building relationships with parents. Like if you're going to be successful in this activity, you have to be able to build relationships. And so before I thought about, you know, what repertoire I'm going to do with North Penn, before I thought about, you know, how are we going to write drill, before I thought about any of that stuff, I was thinking about, man, I got to make sure that these kids and parents get a chance to meet me and see who I am, what kind of person I am, ask me questions, things like that.
So
it's about that.
Okay, so like once you're in your first meeting with them, like let's say if it's your kids. Now, when you met your high school kids, did you meet like your, what you call your leadership team, first drum majors, whatnot, or did you meet all the kids as a whole?
Yeah, the first thing I did was kind of drop in on a section leader and drum major meeting.
Okay.
That was already scheduled, and had a chance to talk to those kids first, which was great.
Excellent. So like once you kind of connect with those kids and you get the little introductory questions and hi, I'm Mr. Santanello stuff out of the way, what do you guys talk about? How do you connect with them? Like as far as even just aside from, hey, let's have a great year, let's do all this. Is there anything else that you did or maybe trying to have in the back of your mind to use just as a way to connect to the kids, to kind of build that rapport to leading into what you'll do with band camp?
Well, like I said, I think that this profession is about people. It's about communication and building relationships. So the main thing I wanted to get across to the kids was that I'm going to take care of you guys, right? I'm going to make sure that you have an outstanding experience in music. You know, I ask my kids in Quakertown all the time about like, hey, what's your favorite experience in band? You know, what's the best part about being in band? And you think maybe they'll say like, oh, well, we played this really awesome piece. It was really challenging and it was great. And we won a trophy because we played it really well. You think they might say, oh, we got to march at MetLife Stadium. Every single kid tells me, oh, the best thing about being in band is like, it's like a big family, right? They immediately go to the social part. They immediately go to the relationships part. They immediately go to talking about how much they feel loved, accepted when they're part of the band. And that's the main thing I wanted to get across to the kids. That number one, I love band, right? Like this is my favorite thing in the whole world, and I'm lucky enough to get to do it as a job. And then immediately after that, I'm talking about, guys, I want to make sure that you know that this is going to be a family.
Excellent. So, let's kind of talk about now with North Penn. Right now, you're kind of still in the introductory phase. You guys have had a few rehearsals, stuff like that, kind of getting ready for the summer season and whatnot. But let's say 2 months down the road, as things are even as far as with the school year now involved, you are officially the head guy there. The nameplate on the band director office now says Mr. Santanello, band director at the high school. Let's talk about your first year plans. So, like, what are you looking at maybe for your first year here at North Penn, which is a very historic and tradition school as well, and how they do things, as you said. So, just while honoring tradition, but also having a visionary mindset, how are you going to approach this first year with your kids?
I think the first thing is you want to go into a new year at a new school, especially one that has a long history of success and tradition, and be willing to listen and observe and watch a lot. Um, as much success as I feel like I've had at Quakertown, this isn't Quakertown. It's a new place. They have their own way of doing things. They have their own traditions. They have a ton of people who are really passionate about the program. And I want to learn as much from them, if not more, than they have to learn from me in that first year. I have an awesome marching band staff there at North Penn. Lots of people, lots of really qualified and talented educators. And I really want to see how they do things. And I really want to ask a lot of questions. And I want to take a lot of notes. And I don't want to go in there and just like kick down the door and be like, all right, we're doing things the Santanello way now. I want to see why North Penn has been as successful as it has been. And then if there's things that I can do to kind of put my spin on it, put my take on it a little bit, that's great. But I think I've seen plenty of colleagues go into a new situation and try to make big wholesale changes right away, and it's not successful more often than not. So I'm going to try to keep things very similar to how things have always run there, and I want to see why it's been such a success. And I think that's challenging. I said that in my interview process too. They said, what do you think is going to be the most challenging thing about being the band director here if you get hired? And I said, the most challenging thing is going to be that it's a really good, really successful program. All right. Like if it was a big train wreck, it would be easy to go in and be like, all right, guys, like I'm the savior. I'm going to make this band great. It's already great. So where do we go from here? Right. This is an organization operating at a super high level. So how do we pick it up and make it better without, upsetting a huge community of people that are really, really passionate about it? So I think the main thing is to do a lot of watching and listening and being humble and being patient. I want to be there for 25 years. So I want to try to keep that in mind, and things don't have to change in the first year or the second year. This is a big long-term plan.
Mm-hmm. So is going in there and now learning the North Penn way, and even that if you weren't trying to change anything, but to learn, and especially with marching band as storied as and traditioned as they are, there are exact ways they might do a horn drop or any kind of commands they do with marching, whatever even small minute details it may be. Even just to learn all of those things as a new director to ensure that you keep that consistent with what's been going on. What ways are you going about to learn all of those details, even those small ones, just to create a sense of consistency for what the kids will have in this upcoming year?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I think I'm lucky in a couple ways. One, as I said before, they have a great staff there, and one of the first questions I was asked by almost everybody once I was hired was, are you interested in keeping the same staff? Like, are you going to keep everybody around? And like my answer was absolutely, right? Because again, they've had success there, and I want to be able to learn from those people. And luckily, people were interested in staying around and retaining their positions under my leadership. So we've had a couple marching band rehearsals, and I've been really fortunate to be able to watch and learn how they do things. At Quakertown, Frank and I worked with a pretty small staff, and we were really used to doing a lot of stuff ourselves. Like, so much of the instruction came from just Frank and I. And at North Penn, there's a lot of staff there that make it so that I have the luxury of being able to stand on the sidelines a little bit and watch. Mm-hmm. As far as things like that go, my philosophy is, man, I don't care how you do your horn drop. Right? As long as it's awesome, right? As long as it's excellent. So like trying to keep that in mind. If there's excellence taking place, does it really matter like how? As long as the kids are being taken care of and the instruction is being done in an efficient and high quality way, things don't have to be the Joe Santanello way, especially right away, right? If things are excellent, that's great. If there's things happening that aren't excellent, then ask questions. Hey, tell me about this. So why do we do this way? Or like, would you consider doing this? Those kinds of things. Um, but yeah, it's like I said, it's been nice that I have a big staff there that I can kind of trust to do things, and I have the luxury of learning from them.
Great. So, like, whenever you're working with your new staff, and especially now, as you said, you've had a couple rehearsals. So are you approaching these rehearsals as, like, let's say if you had a car, maybe where you will maybe ride shotgun and kind of let the staff do what they've done, and then you'll just kind of sit and watch and kind of follow along the way and navigate as needed? Or is it something where you've tried from time to time taking the wheel and asking people, hey, where do we want to go next? So, like, which ways have you went about, like, as far as who is the person in charge in the room leading the instruction at any point in time? Or is it more of just you're the specialist here at the drumline, you do your thing, I'm just going to watch? How's that look?
Well, I think my philosophy as a band director, especially with the marching band activity, has always been to let your staff do their thing, right? Let your design people design. I'm not a design person. I don't want to get involved in that process or put limitations on my design staff, because I know that's not my strength, right? I'm going to let my drumline guy do his drumline thing. I'm going to let my guard people do their guard thing. So I'm carrying that same philosophy to the new school. I feel like my strength is indoors, right? Creating a great ensemble is what I consider to be my strength. So when we're outside at these rehearsals, I'm letting the visual staff do most of the work, and I'm watching. I'm jumping in, working with individuals a little bit, giving a couple comments to the full ensemble. But I trust those guys to do what they do, right? They do it well. Inside, I've taken the reins of the full ensemble music stuff a little bit more, because that's where I feel my strength is. I want my people, my staff, to be able to do their jobs and to feel valued and feel like they have a purpose when they show up at work. But at the same time, there are parts that I want to be hands-on with, because I want the band to get to know me. Right. I talked before about building relationships, and I think the best way to build a relationship with the kids is to direct them, to teach them. Right. My personality comes out best when I'm in front of the kids talking about attacks and releases, or talking about subdivision or whatever. Like, that's the stuff that fires me up and brings out my personality. So I want the kids to get to know me that way. So I've mostly done a little of both, like you said, on the outdoor side of things and the visual side of things, kind of riding shotgun a little bit. But inside with the music stuff, taking the reins a little bit more and letting the kids get to know me as a band director.
Excellent. So now, aside from your work now with the upcoming season with North Penn, another thing that you have and will continue to do is being the director of the Quakertown Band, which is a historic community band based out of Quakertown, Pennsylvania, correct?
Yes. Okay. Quakertown Band is a community band that's been continuously performing since 1877. So it's one of the nation's oldest bands. I'm the 14th director of that group in those 142 years. I started as the principal conductor 2 years ago, and I look forward to continuing my relationship with that organization. So it's a pretty cool thing. I think it's pretty awesome because it has, in a lot of ways, prepared me to take over a program like North Penn, because it has so much tradition. It has a huge following of people that are really passionate about it. There's so many similarities between those two programs, as different as they are. So in the few years that I've been associated with the community band, I've learned a lot about what to do and what not to do when taking over a program that has so much tradition in it. I could tell you some things have gone really well, and some things have not gone so well. An example of a learning experience for me was the community band used to end every concert with the Stars and Stripes Forever, which is it's a great march, right? It's a great piece. We've all heard it many times. Um, I didn't think the band played it particularly well, and if anyone from the band listens to this podcast, they will not be surprised by me saying that, right? It's gotten to the point where they've played it so many times for so many years that most of the people aren't even literally looking at the music anymore, and they kind of play it like how it's supposed to be played, but a lot of people have it quote unquote memorized, and it just wasn't great. So I decided to put it away. And man, that spurred some major league controversy. We had donors writing in, we're not going to donate to the band anymore if you don't play Stars and Stripes Forever. I mean, the band members, a lot of them were really ticked off. And so, ripping that Band-Aid off of the band a little bit was kind of a rough experience. And I think that's led me to, with North Penn, think a little bit more about, all right, if there's something that you think needs to change, think about the way you're going to do it. Think about gradually changing things or just waiting to change things, because there could be a lot of backlash in that way. That's just a little example, but a little thing like that, like, hey man, Sousa wrote like 130 other marches. Like, let's try ending the concert with a different one, which you might not think is a big deal, but like it was a big deal to a lot of people. So that is just kind of a learning experience in that sense.
So with leading, and again with the Quakertown band just being such a historic group, obviously as you mentioned, they have their own unique traditions, and kind of how that's affected your upcoming work as a high school band director. As far as now, this is currently how you're going. Is Quakertown band still going on right now, or preparing for a summer season or anything like that?
Yeah, we play lots of gigs during the summer.
Okay, so and even with that, I know down here in Maryland, we have in this community, there are several high caliber community bands. Some might feature some advanced high school students, even up to people I believe that may be up into their 90s or older. So just being able to work and balance, especially in your current state right now, all the age levels. Because I know myself where I teach. I am a band director in a very small rural community, grades 5 through 12, and sometimes that can be really hard switching gears. Some parts of my day I might be talking about like someone's new puppy or what they did, and then all of a sudden my high school kids come in and then we're talking about how ugly the prom dresses are in the upcoming year, and there's nothing good at the mall. It can be drastically different in how you interact in those connections with people. So right now, working as a middle school band director, working with an upcoming high school group and connecting with those kids, and even like what you've done with your work with the Panther Marching Band, and then even working with a community band where it's at the adult and maybe somewhat of the senior demographic as well. How have you adjusted your teaching or ability to connect with others, working with a wide breadth of what, even if we'd say playing ability, but also just age? Like, how do you work with that many different types of people and how to connect in with their age and demographics?
Well, I mean, that's one of the things that's awesome about band, right? Because the fact that an organization could exist, like a community band, where you have 13 and 14-year-olds sitting next to 80 and 85-year-olds, and it works and it makes sense. Like that's really special and powerful. So the first thing is, make the music the priority, right? Like the way that we build relationships and bond with members of our band is through the appreciation of music, through the excitement of concert band literature, through the process of starting a piece and having it sound awful, right? And then a few weeks later, it's a major work of art, right? I think that's something that's pretty universal. Like a 13-year-old can get as excited about playing a great piece of music as an 83-year-old can. So like that, without being overly cheesy, like music being like the universal language, like that's what it's all about, right? So I think that's the main thing, is to make the music the focus of what you're doing, right? Building relationships through music, through concert band, It doesn't really matter what age of person you're working with. And just being yourself. I mean, I think I'm a big kid at heart, so I get along very well with middle school and high school kids. But I found that seniors, and I mean, we have some seniors in the band. One of our band members in the Quakertown Community Band, it's been in the band for 61 years, which is like amazing. But like seniors like that too. Like they like to feel young again, right? And they like to, when they have a good time at a concert band rehearsal, it takes them right back to high school and high school band, and I think that makes people feel really good.
Excellent. So, kind of elaborate a little bit on what you were talking about with programming music, and even a quality musical experience is a quality musical experience. But one of the biggest things can go behind that is our philosophies and how we go about programming, whether it be programming by ability level, age level, or maybe even to the specific interests of that ensemble. If I had some like a Lady Gaga medley, that's probably fit for a certain audience versus another set of players. So, how do you go approach programming for all your different levels of ensemble? So, and this can get interesting too, because obviously, if you can talk about your groups at Strayer, like what have you went into deciding how you program things this year for your kids? How are you going to, if you haven't done so yet, in your upcoming months when you'll have your concert bands at North Penn, how are you going to program for a group at that level, but for kids you've never heard before? And even how do you go about programming for a community band which performs throughout the year, which can even have a wide array of age and ability levels?
Okay, so with programming, there's a spectrum, right? And at one end of the spectrum is like pure entertainment value, and at the other end of the spectrum is like pure educational value, right? And with the school groups, with Strayer specifically, and with North Penn coming up, I try to lean pretty heavily towards the educational end of the spectrum. My job as a teacher, and if you think about any other thing that's going on in your school, your math teachers are not concerned about whether the way they teach math or the math content they're teaching is going to be popular with the community. Your language arts teacher, your English teacher is not choosing their novels that they share with the kids based on, what mom or dad is going to think when they see that book in the kids' hands. So as an educator of music, we need to try to have the same philosophy, in my opinion. I'm going to pick pieces that are going to help them to grow as musicians. There are like pieces that are entertaining to audiences that are also really, really strong educational tools. And that's where I'm looking mostly. I spent hours on choosing repertoire for my groups. I took a whole course this summer on choosing repertoire. It was through Vandercook College of Music, and it was killer. And I just spent hours looking through scores and listening to recordings and trying to find stuff that's going to work for my kids, for their strengths and weaknesses, pushing them to become better musicians, fitting with the curriculum that we're teaching in terms of rhythms and key signatures and terminology and things like that. So I'm really leaning towards like the educational piece. Like that's my job, is to teach them. With the community band, I'm leaning more towards the entertainment side of things. But I also look at the group and say like, okay, we're performing at this level, but in my mind, I think we could be at this level. I think we could be higher. So how do I get them there? And that's a bigger challenge. How do I get this group of mostly adults and mostly older adults to want to grow as musicians and still provide entertainment to the community, right? And provide entertainment to donors who keep the group afloat. So that's kind of a challenge in that. So I don't know. I think that, and I said this before, like at the middle level, I think there's a lot of super high entertainment stuff out there that really isn't that educational for kids to learn. And I've heard it all throughout 10 years of middle school teaching. And why don't we play this? Why don't we play this? Like, why don't you play something people know? And it's like, all right, we could play that, but then the the trombones play only B flat and F for the entire song. Like they don't get to learn anything, right? Or it's like, yeah, we could do that tune, but we have 12 drummers and there's a drum set part for this piece. And even if I split it up and give each kid a piece of the drum set part, like we still have 7 kids that have nothing to do. So I got to find something that's going to keep everybody learning and engaged. And you know what I found? If you play something at a really high level and it sounds great and the kids have to put a lot of work into it to make it great, they're going to feel just as good about that piece, if not better, than something that's just poppy or pure entertainment value. And at the beginning of my career, I mixed in a little bit of pop music and stuff, or I would do a strictly pop music concert at the end of the year. But I haven't programmed anything like that in years, and my kids feel just as good about a band, if not better, than they did 9 years ago. If the focus is excellence, and they have to work hard to get there, then that feeling at the concert of performing that music is really powerful and positive. And so the same thing at the high school level, going into North Penn next year. And I don't know the kids, but I'm getting a lot of really good scouting reports, if you will, from the previous director. And, you know, I've heard the band perform. I'm looking at their programs from the past 5-10 years and seeing what they have been performing. And so I'm able to go in there with a pretty good idea of what I want to achieve and what I want to program. But I'm going to try to make sure that there's educational value in everything that we're doing. Now, there are some times where, like, I know they do a concert where the high school band performs for, like, the elementary bands. And it's like, okay, in that moment, we need something that the elementary kids are going to get super excited about because we want them to be in band 6 years from now when they get to high school. And, you know, that's where I pick something out that's really, really cool and pretty high on the entertainment scale, but something that we're going to spend 2 days in rehearsal on, not months. So I think you do have to understand the purpose of your performance, but most of the time the purpose is going to be for kids to learn.
Excellent. So now to kind of move on to some other questions that we ask all of our guests now to wrap some things up. So as far as now, we've talked a lot about marching band and concert band. So usually I ask one per person. I'm really intrigued, and if you can answer this in 2 parts, that would be really cool. So if you could tell us about some of your favorite or one of your favorite rehearsal tactics, even if you can say one for marching band or if you have one for concert band specifically that you found very effective over the years.
One thing I've noticed over the past, the 10 years of my career is that many kids, a surprising number of kids, have like a pretty poor idea of pulse, and it's not as intrinsic as I would have thought. And I don't know what that reasoning is. I don't know if it's the cuts to elementary general music, in terms of cutting exposure to music for kids. But a lot of kids don't come in with a good idea of pulse, and it's not as internal as I'd like it to be. And when I ask kids, like, who's responsible for pulse in the ensemble, they're like, the drums. And I was like, all right, well, if we're only getting pulse from drums, like, we're not going to be a very good band. So one thing I've been doing a lot in rehearsal is trying to get my students to demonstrate pulse and feel pulse, like physically through body percussion. So we might have them keep a downbeat with their hand on their thigh and then do upbeats with their other hand on their chest. So we get a 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, so that everybody's feeling that pulse on their physical body. And then I'll have them say their rhythm, like, with a ta syllable, or we'll have them sizzle it, their rhythm, or sing their part, but while they're doing that physical beat keeping on their body. And I've seen that really change the pulse of the group in any given piece that we're rehearsing. And I've done that at every level. I've done it at middle school level when we're doing some grade 1 piece. I've done it with honors bands, that I've conducted. I know that we did a Balmages piece with the Adams County band, and we were struggling to pull that that piece together, because the percussion is not driving pulse in that. It's very sporadic and sound effect oriented, and so like the winds need to be keeping pulse. And once we started doing the body percussion and saying our part, really pulled it together. And I've done it at the community band level too. We just did to Kelly's Blue Shades, and it's the same kind of thing. There's not a lot of percussion driving. There's a lot of winds, like playing like eighth notes and like kind of like a minimalism, pointillism feel to it in places. And man, as soon as we started doing the body percussion and saying our part, really pulled it together. So that's just a way that we've been trying to develop pulse in the ensemble a little bit, and that I thought was pretty effective.
Yeah, really cool. So now, to move on with your career, could even go back to when you were in school, Westchester, or even earlier. Who are some major leaders that have inspired you in your career, whether it be personally or professionally?
I've had too many to name, but I'll try to name a couple of them. Certainly, Dr. Yozviak at Westchester has been a great mentor to me. Has done ridiculous things with the program at Westchester. I had an awesome opportunity to work with like some huge names in the band world through my master's program, American Band College. I mean, just like a ridiculous amount of people. I worked with Tony Maiello, who's been one of my biggest influences in terms of just a person who is fully committed to caring about students. And also the amount of time and energy that he puts into score prep is just amazing. Working with Tony through the American Band College been an unforgettable experience. Some other people that I've gotten to work with out there, Paula Kreider is a phenomenal teacher and somebody who like can do amazing things with a middle school ensemble. Ray Kramer is another name that I've gotten to work with, who talks so much about developing ensemble sound. And we don't call our warm-ups at Strayer Middle School anymore. I stole this from Ray, and we call them ensemble sensitivity training, right? Making the ensemble sensitive to one another, listening to each other, and tuning the ensemble. He's been great. Learned so much from him. Learned so much from Peter Boonshaft and Dr. Tim in terms of that building relationships with kids part, and how important our role is and how much responsibility we have to take care of kids. So I've had so many influences on my career, and that's really important, is for all of us as educators to get out there and meet people and play in bands and go to clinics and go to workshops and learn from these people. There are amazing educators out there. So I feel like I've been really lucky to sit under the baton of a lot of great people, or attend clinics of great people, whether it's at PMEA or Midwest or whatever.
Oh yeah, that's certainly a big list of names, but it's kind of
yeah. So it's a good advertisement for the American Band College.
Oh yes, ABC. Is it still at Sam Houston State?
No, I actually don't know what university they just severed ties with Sam Houston. I'm not sure who they're with now, but
okay. Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so anyway, to kind of talk about even with some of those groups, like, with Dr. Tim or even Dr. Boonshaft, one of the big things that, they're known for is their aspects of developing leadership within the program and developing the leader as a director, too. So if you were, and this is kind of a job interview question more, but it always gets some unique perspectives. If you had to think of 3 words to describe an outstanding leader of a comprehensive music program, whether it be choir, band, orchestra, whatever, what would those 3 words be and why?
I think the first word would be visionary. I think it's so important to have a vision of what you want the program to be. I would challenge anybody that's listening to this now to have their 60-second blurb in their head of what their band program should be, or what they want their band program to be in the next 5 years. Like you have to have vision. If you don't have a big end goal in mind, I'm not sure how you structure your daily activities, or you got to be working towards something. So whether it's like, this is what I want my band to sound like at the end of the year and having a vision for that, or this is what I want the program to look like in 5 years. These are the offerings I want us to have. This is the conference I want us to play at. This is the size of the ensemble. I think you have to have some vision, and know where you want to go and where you want to be, whether it's a year, 5 years, 10 years. Second word I would pick would be communicator. Communication is more important than ever. Being a high school band director is so communication heavy. You have probably a marching band staff of anywhere from 5 to 20 people working for you, depending on the size of your program. And you have to know how to communicate with all those people. You have to make sure that they feel valued. You have to make sure that they feel like they're being heard. You have to communicate changes and schedules and all kinds of stuff to those people. You have your kids, whether you work with 20 kids or you work with 220 kids, it's important to be communicating with them in whatever way possible. And knowing that communicating sometimes means just listening, right? Like I said before, I survey my kids all the time, and I ask questions like, what part of band do you love? What part of band do you hate? What would you do differently in our band rehearsal if you could change something? Those kinds of questions, and really taking that stuff seriously. That's part of communication. Quakertown makes us do this survey called Panorama, which I don't know if you've ever heard of, but they survey all the students in the school about their teachers. And all right, there's definitely some flaws with this survey, but they ask some pretty interesting questions. One of the questions is, if you walked into your classroom crying, like what would that teacher think? Right? And like, several years ago, I look at the answer to that question, and it was a pretty low percentage of kids thought that I would care if they walked into the room crying. And I was like, wow, all right. Like that really woke me up a little bit. And it's like, man, I want every kid to think that I care about them. If they came into my room upset, like of course I would be concerned. How do I make sure that kids know that? So that's all part of the communication piece with your students, is making sure they know that you care about them. And then you have your parent group to communicate with. Bad communication with parents is probably the reason why like 90% of band directors that fail is they're not working with the parents to do things. And that doesn't mean you do whatever the parents say and let them run the organization, like definitely not, but it means listening. So communication would be my second thing. My last thing would be being a good student. I guess if I could just use one word, it would be student. I think a great band director has to be a great student, whether that means playing your instrument, and I think that's a big part of it, playing as much as you can. I play in like 5 or 6 groups, orchestras and concert bands, and so I'm still a student of the French horn. I sometimes wish I wasn't a student of the French horn. I wish I had picked something else, because it's really freaking hard. But I'm a student on the instrument, right? I'm working almost every day to be a better horn player, and I think through that process of continually try to better myself as a musician and a technician of that instrument, it's making me a better teacher. Certainly making me a better horn teacher and a better brass teacher, but just a better teacher in general. You have to be a student of all those mentors we talked about just a few minutes ago. Be willing to go to clinics and conferences and listen to what people who are really good at this activity have to say. I think sometimes I see some pretty interesting reactions from those clinics and conferences, and people saying like, oh, well, that person doesn't know what it's like to teach where I teach. They're only successful because they have this or they have that. And people get really defensive and really dismissive. And I think you have to be like really open to hearing what people are saying, and try to be a good student. Take that information and figure out a way to make it work for your group and your school and your situation. And so I think some people really get turned off by those clinics and conferences, and they stop going. And they think, well, it doesn't matter what this educator says or what this band is able to do, because we won't be able to do that here. And so they stop being a student. They stop listening. They stop trying to get more information about how to be better at this activity. So I think a great teacher has to be a great student.
For sure. So now, with this next one, to kind of make it broad a little bit, so if you had to offer 1 or 2 bits of advice to any music educator in a program, whether it be a choir director, middle school band director, high school orchestra director, what bit or 2 of information or advice would you give to them? And why would you say that advice?
I think my advice I'll talk about middle school a little bit, since that's where I spent most of my time for the past 10 years. So my advice to anyone going into teaching middle school would be that your kids deserve you to have high expectations for them. I hope that makes sense the way I said that. Anybody that's going into a middle school thinking like, it's just middle school, it's going to be whatever, we might get to this level, but it's not going to be much better than that. Your kids deserve better than that. So my advice to anyone that's going to go teach middle school is to have really high expectations for the students and figure out a way to help them reach those, being positive, being supportive, but like, don't sell those kids short. That's my biggest pet peeve with some band directors who teach middle school, is they think that middle school kids can only do this. There's limits on what they can do. And I think you have to go into it thinking, I know that this band can be extremely good, right? I know that we can be musicians, not just kids with instruments in their hands, right? And we can make great music happen at the middle level. Like, the kids deserve that. And it's the same thing, like, you compare it to other areas. Like, I don't think the math teacher is going in thinking like, it's middle school math. Like, if they get 75% or 80% of it right, like, that's good enough. Like, they're not thinking that, right? They want every kid to be as good as they can possibly be at whatever math concept they're teaching. And so you got to take the same approach to middle school band, right? I want every single kid to be the best possible musician they can be, and don't put limitations on them, whether it's in the content that you're teaching or the difficulty level of the repertoire. Like, give them the opportunity to be better than you think they can be.
Excellent. So now, to wrap up our interview here, this is kind of a little out there question, but this is usually more geared towards when someone retires. We'll ask, what impressions or what memories about you would you like your students to have about you and from your time together? But this is even maybe unique to your situation where you're about to leave a program that you've been with for so long. If you had to boil it down to a few fundamental components, what would you like your students to reflect upon and remember about your time together as their director?
All right. So I think I want kids to reflect on their time as members of the Strayer Middle School Band or the Panther Marching Band, and having the opportunity to remember that they were part of something really successful and that they were an important part of that success. There's so many kids out there that don't feel a connection to school. They don't feel a connection to their peers. They may not feel like they're very good at anything, especially these days. And I think the nice thing about band is that, and I stress this with the kids all the time, that every single member is important, right? On a marching band field, like, everybody's important. Everybody has their own dot, right? There's no backups, there's no second string. Everybody's a starter. And we've been able to have some really great success in Quakertown in the past 10 years. And I hope that my kids know that they were all huge parts of that success, that they were all equal parts in that success. Because for some of those kids, like, band is the only place where they feel like they belong. Band is the only place where they have a connection to peers. Band is the only place where they might experience success, right? I mean, I have kids in my band who don't do well in school, right? They're struggling to read, they're struggling to do math, but when they get out on the marching band field, like, they're part of a winning team, and they're putting in as much effort and work, and they share in that success just as much as anybody else. So I hope that's what kids reflect on from their time under my direction, is that they know that they were valued members of the team, that we accomplished great things, but it's like they were the reason why as an individual. That's the kind of culture I think we've tried to build here, is that band is a family and that everybody counts, everybody's important. And the success, like, isn't about me or Frank Parker or anybody. It's like their success. They owned it. They created it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed hearing that, especially about that part of just really putting it in the perspective of the kid that it's their own success. So that does it up for our questions now, Joe. I'd like to wrap things up with, again, thanking you for taking the time to do this. It's been a great learning experience for myself, and I know all of our listeners out there. I'm sure people have gotten a lot, but I'm sure there's at least one thing from this interview that could be really taken into a lot of people entering a new program. Lots of great perspective. So to tie that up, I'd just like to say thank you again, and best wishes to your students as you wrap up the year at Quakertown, and to your new students upcoming with the new season at North Penn.
Thanks, Doug.
Yeah, thank you, and have a good one.
You too.
This concludes our episode. Many thanks to Joe Santanello for sharing all of his time and insight on what it takes to lead a program that is truly focused on student excellence. If you enjoyed today's episode, please make sure to follow us on iTunes, Google Play Music, or to go to Facebook and follow our page under Director's Circle to stay updated on all future episodes. This is Doug Conrad saying thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in to the next edition of Director's Circle.